My name is Tessa, and I've been working in Europe for about a year now. It's been a good change for me, new experiences, new people, a fresh start. Back home, I left behind my parents and my younger sister Janet, though honestly, we weren't exactly what you'd call a close-knit family. Janet and I have this weird relationship, if you can even call it that. She's 8 years younger than me, which meant we were always at different stages of life. When I was dealing with high school drama, she was still playing with dolls. By the time she hit her teenage years, I was already out of college and focused on my career. We basically lived in different worlds, only crossing paths during family dinners and holidays. These days, our communication has dwindled to nothing more than exchanging happy birthday and Merry Christmas messages. Before moving abroad, I had my own place back home, a nice apartment that actually used to belong to my grandmother. It's funny how that came about. After college, I landed a good job in finance and started making decent money. 3 years into my career, I decided it was time to stop renting and buy my own place. That's when my parents mentioned the apartment my grandmother had left to Mom in her will. "We've been renting it out," Mom told me over dinner one night. "But if you're interested, we could sell it to you." The more I thought about it, the more perfect it seemed. I knew that apartment like the back of my hand, all those Sunday afternoons spent visiting Grandma, helping her water her beloved plants on the balcony, eating her famous chocolate chip cookies in the cozy kitchen. The price they offered was fair, and the location was great. So I bought it, paid them $120,000, and made it my home for the next 3 years. Then the opportunity in Europe came up. It was too good to pass up: better salary, chance to travel, new challenges. I kept the apartment, of course. It was my first real investment, and I figured I could always rent it out or come back to it someday. I was sitting at my desk in my Brussels apartment, going through some work emails, when my phone lit up with Janet's name. I actually did a double take. We hadn't had a real conversation in what felt like forever. For a moment, I just stared at the screen, wondering if something was wrong. "Hello?" I answered, trying to keep the surprise out of my voice. "Tessa." "Hi." Janet sounded cheerful, which was both relieving and confusing. "How are you? How's work going? Are you seeing anyone?" The questions came rapid fire, as if we were close sisters who regularly caught up on each other's lives. I told her about my job, mentioned that I was single but focusing on my career, and admitted I wasn't sure when I'd be coming back home. "That's actually perfect," Janet said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "I just started college. Did Mom and Dad tell you?" "No, they didn't mention it," I replied. We hadn't talked much lately either. "Well, I did, and guess what? I talked to Mom and Dad, and they said I could stay in your apartment while I'm in college." "Isn't that great? It's only 2 blocks from campus, so I won't have to spend money on transportation. Plus, I won't have to pay rent, which is a huge help." I gripped my phone tighter, trying to process what I'd just heard. The casual way Janet announced her plans to move into my apartment made my blood boil. Taking a deep breath, I tried to keep my voice steady. "Janet, wait a minute," I cut into her enthusiastic planning. "You can't just decide to move in there. You should have asked me about this first, not Mom and Dad." "Asked you?" Janet sounded genuinely confused. "Why?" "Mom and Dad already said it was fine." I pinched the bridge of my nose, fighting back my growing frustration. "Because you need my permission, not theirs. You can't just move in there because they said so." "But they said." "I don't care what they said," I snapped, then immediately regretted my tone. I softened my voice slightly. "Look, Janet, I appreciate that you're trying to figure out your living situation, but this isn't going to work." There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Janet spoke again, her voice had that same maddeningly calm tone our mother used when she thought she was being reasonable. "I don't see why not. You're in Europe, the apartment is just sitting there empty." "It's not sitting empty," I corrected her. "And what happens when I decide to come home? I could return from Europe at any time. Where am I supposed to live then?" Janet let out a small laugh that made my jaw clench. Oh, come on, Tessa. You make really good money at your job. If you come back, you can just rent another place. It's not like you can't afford it. I sat there in stunned silence. The sheer audacity of her suggestion, that I should rent another apartment while she lived rent-free in mine, left me speechless for a moment. The assumption that because I had a good job, I should just give up my home to her, it was unbelievable. No, I said firmly, my voice cold. Absolutely not. I'm not going to rent another place just so you can live there for free. This isn't happening, Janet. But Mom and Dad. I don't care what Mom and Dad said, I nearly shouted. The answer is no. Without waiting for her response, I hung up the phone. My hands were shaking as I set it down on my desk. I spent the next few hours trying to distract myself with work, but I couldn't focus. The conversation with Janet kept replaying in my head. I knew it wasn't over. In our family, nothing ever ended with just one conversation. Sure enough, just as I was heating up leftovers for dinner, my phone started buzzing. Mom's name flashed across the screen. I let it ring twice, taking deep breaths and preparing myself for what was coming. Finally, I answered. Hello? Tessa. My mother's voice had that particular tone I knew all too well, the one that meant I was in trouble, like I was still a teenager who'd broken curfew. We need to talk about what happened with Janet. I moved to my couch, abandoning my dinner. Yeah, I guess we do. I don't understand why you're being so difficult about this, she started in. You shouldn't treat your sister like this. She's family. It's just for a little while she's in college. Nothing terrible will happen if Janet stays in the apartment. I ran my fingers through my hair, fighting to keep my voice level. Mom, I can't just let her move in there. What happens when she doesn't want to leave? I'm not going to end up fighting with my sister to get her out of my apartment. Oh, don't be dramatic, Mom scoffed. That won't happen. You don't know that, I countered. Besides, why can't you guys help her rent her own place? Why does it have to be my apartment? There was a slight pause before Mom answered, we've already spent all our money on Janet's college tuition. We can't afford to pay rent on top of that. I stood up and started pacing my living room. Well, I don't want her living there. Who knows what could happen to the place? And besides, I'm renting it out right now. I'm getting income from that apartment. If Janet moves in, I'll be the one paying the bills while she lives there for free. Well, I could hear her trying to think of a response. Unless, I added, you and Dad want to pay me rent for Janet to live there? The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Then my mother's voice came back, sharp and angry. I can't believe how brazen and selfish you're being. Demanding rent from your own sister? What's gotten into you? Selfish? Now I was the one getting angry. How is it selfish to want to keep my own apartment? The apartment that I bought with my own money? Or did you forget that I paid you and Dad $120,000 for it? That has nothing to do with. It has everything to do with this. I was practically shouting now. I didn't get this apartment for free. I bought it with my money. My hard-earned money. The line went dead. The next week dragged by in complete silence. No calls from Mom, no messages from Janet, nothing. I threw myself into work, trying to ignore the knot in my stomach that grew bigger each day. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped, but it was never them. I was in the middle of a presentation at work when my phone started vibrating in my pocket. I ignored it, but whoever it was called 3 more times. During my lunch break, I finally checked. It was Aunt Sarah, Mom's sister. We weren't particularly close, but she'd always been the voice of reason in family disputes. Tessa, her familiar voice came through the line. What's going on with your family? I just talked to your mother, and she seemed, well, not herself. I sighed and closed my office door. It's a mess, Aunt Sarah. Over the next 20 minutes, I poured out the whole story, Janet's call, Mom's reaction, everything. Aunt Sarah listened without interrupting, making only small sounds of acknowledgement. I see, she said when I finished. Have you tried talking to Janet again? Calmly, I mean? It sounds like there might be some misunderstanding here. What's there to misunderstand? I asked, slumping in my chair. They want my apartment for Janet, end of story. Honey, Aunt Sarah's voice was gentle but firm, sometimes things aren't as simple as they seem. Call your sister. Video call her, so you can see each other's faces. Try to understand where she's coming from, and make sure she understands where you're coming from too. I wanted to resist, but something in her tone made me reconsider. Maybe she was right. Maybe we needed to clear the air. That evening, after work, I took a deep breath and initiated a video call with Janet. To my surprise, she answered almost immediately. She looked tired, her usually neat hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Hi, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. Can we talk? Janet nodded, her expression guarded. I need to understand something, I started. Why are you so set on living in this particular apartment? Why not rent your own place? Janet's face hardened slightly. Why should I rent somewhere else when Mom and Dad said I could stay in their apartment? You lived there for 4 years, now it's my turn. They said it was fine. I felt like I'd been slapped. Their apartment? Yeah, Janet said, lifting her chin. Mom and Dad's apartment. They inherited it from Grandma, remember? They said I could live there while I'm in college, just like you did. For a moment, I just stared at her through the screen. Then, without a word, I reached for my laptop and pulled up my files. Janet, I need to show you something. I shared my screen and opened the folder containing my property documents. This isn't Mom and Dad's apartment. It hasn't been for years. Look at the date on this deed of sale. Look at the purchase agreement. I bought this apartment from them. I paid them $120,000 for it. The silence that followed was absolute. Janet's eyes widened as she scanned the documents, her mouth falling slightly open. But that's impossible, she whispered. They told me, they said. She shook her head. This doesn't make any sense. Why would they lie about this? How could they forget selling you the apartment? I watched Janet's face on my screen as she processed the documents I'd shown her. She looked pale, confused, and somehow younger than she had just moments before. I felt a sudden surge of sympathy for my sister. Well, I said, trying to lighten the mood, at least the money went to a good cause. Mom told me they used it to pay for your college tuition. Janet's head snapped up. What? The money from the apartment sale, I explained. Mom said they spent it on your education. Janet let out a strange laugh that sounded more like a sob. Tessa, I'm on a full scholarship. Mom and Dad haven't paid a cent for my education. Now it was my turn to stare